Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. Golden rule of journalism: follow the money, uncover the stakes to get the full story. It works in Ukraine. Why is the war dragging on? Because Russia is not winning and Ukraine is not losing. And what is propping up the Ukrainian defense? Not taking away from their fighting spirit, it is the weapons supplied by the West. The US has sent 17 installments so far. They've announced the 18th one, their biggest. Total supplies touching about $10 billion. It is no secret that wars help America's military-industrial complex, and this war directly involves the world's second biggest defense supplier, that is Russia. While Moscow fights a war, can it supply weapons to its buyers? It cannot. Will this gap be America's gain, or will it be China's gain? How is Ukraine impacting the global arms bazaar? And are all the weapons that go into Ukraine reaching the front lines? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss all of this and more.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
War is often called the last resort. Countries decide to fight only when they run out of options, when they're boxed in. Not the case with the United States. The Americans use war as state policy. Do you know why? Because there is big money to be made. The latest example is Ukraine. Joe Biden has unveiled another weapons package for them. Guess how much it's worth? $1 billion. It's the 18th such package to be announced by the US, also the largest since the invasion. Put together, America's military assistance has topped $9.8 billion, almost $10 billion. Now let me put that number in perspective. Bhutan's entire GDP is $2 billion. Tajikistan is $7 billion. Congo, $8.7 billion. America's military assistance alone is worth more than that. In fact, more than 50 countries have a GDP smaller than $10 billion. Imagine that. The Pentagon says this latest package is suited to the evolving battle situation in Ukraine. Listen in.
We are working around the clock to fulfill Ukraine's priority security assistance requests, delivering weapons from the United States stocks when they are available, and facilitating the delivery of weapons by allies and partners when their systems better suit Ukraine's needs.
What does the new aid package include? Additional high mobility artillery rocket systems, what we call the HIMARS. 75,000 rounds of ammunition, 20 mortar systems, 20,000 rounds of mortar ammunition, 1,000 javelins, 50 armored medical treatment vehicles, and hundreds of anti-armor systems. I know it sounds like a lot, but tonight we're not focusing on the announcement, we're focusing on the deliveries. How many of these weapons actually end up in Ukrainian hands? Is anyone keeping tabs on them? According to CBS News, no. Their report says only 30 to 40% of US weapons end up with Ukraine's army. The rest, quite literally, gone with the wind. Let me explain how this works. Ukraine ranks 122nd out of 180 countries on corruption indices. It is the second most corrupt country in Europe, second only to Russia. So to get things done, you need to grease the wheels, maybe pay off the oligarchs or power lords. The same thing is happening with the weapons, it is feared. Corruption is gobbling up Western military assistance in Ukraine. Ukraine's army is only getting around 30% of what is being sent to them. What about the rest? These are top-notch lethal weapons. Where exactly are they ending up? European officials say some weapons landed with organized crime groups. Russia believes they could end up in West Asia. Neither scenario bodes well for the world. Which brings us to another question. Where is the oversight? Apparently there isn't any. Listen to what an Amnesty official told CBS News. What is really worrying is that some countries that are sending weapons do not seem to think that it is their responsibility to put in place a very robust oversight mechanism. Ukraine says they're tracking all the weapons. But to be honest, that's very unlikely. Dozens of shipments are arriving on a regular basis. To track them while fighting a war is not easy. The better option is for the West to track the shipments, make sure they end up in the right places. After 5 months of war, they're finally doing it, it seems. A U.S. defense attaché landed in Kiev earlier this month. His job is to monitor and control arms. And reports say this is helping, that more than 30% of the weapons are now reaching Ukrainians. But should that be good enough? After all, this is not weather forecast. Nothing less than 100% should be acceptable. We've seen what happens when America pumps weapons into foreign wars. They did that in Iraq in the 2000s. Years later, the Islamic State was using those weapons. Same in Afghanistan. The Taliban are now flying American helicopters. They're using American guns. Ukraine could be next in line. Former Soviet states are hotbeds of illegal arms trade. And yes, for once, the Hollywood stereotype is true. If these weapons escape Ukraine, they could end up in that market. Terrorists could buy them. Separatists could buy them. So why isn't the US more proactive about tracking them? Like I said at the start, because there's money to be made here. America's military-industrial complex is making billions off this war. Look at Lockheed Martin. Their shares are up 7.4% in the last 6 months. Another example is Northrop Grumman. Their shares are up 22%. General Dynamics, up 4.8%. Now compare this to how US markets have fared in this period. Dow Jones is down 8% in the same period. Nasdaq is down 12%. We're talking about a global recession by the end of this year, but clearly the weapons industry is not affected. Strange, isn't it? The US talks about withdrawing from battlefields, about reducing their military footprint, yet they're funneling weapons to the same regions. Do you know why? Because US politicians benefit from this system. In the last 2 decades, defense companies spent $285 million in campaign contributions in the US. $2.5 billion in lobbying. They also hired 200 ex-government officials to do all the dirty work. We're talking about a well-oiled machinery here, a system that makes America richer with every war. Now, with Russia stuck in Ukraine, there's an added advantage. You see, Russia is the second largest arms supplier in the world. If they cannot sell weapons, it leaves a gap in the market, and the US could fill that gap. But if they don't, China will. Experts believe China could dominate the value arms market. What are value arms? Sort of like more affordable alternatives. You see, the likes of the US and France sell high-end stuff, and not every country can afford that, especially buys in Africa and Southeast Asia. So those countries often bought from Russia. If China can somehow take over that market, they could make millions. In fact, they're well placed to do that. China is among the top vendors to major Russian clients like Myanmar, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Uganda. So all they have to do is slide into the gap left by Russia. This would be even more dangerous than America's military-industrial complex. In the US, money dictates policy. In China, it's the opposite. Arms trade is an extension of Chinese state policy. Their primary goal is to gain strategic influence. Making money is secondary. And all of this makes you wonder, where can countries buy weapons from? Is there no safe alternative in the market? As things stand, there really isn't. The US is driven only by profits. They don't care if their weapons win the war as long as they make money. Russia's war machine is grounded in Ukraine and China's weapons come with conditions attached. The market is ripe for a safe, reasonable and trustworthy seller. Something to ponder upon for policymakers everywhere, including here in India. Now, from the business of weapons to that of fighters, a Russian group is minting money in Ukraine. It goes by the name of Wagner Group. You may have heard about it. A shadowy band of mercenaries loyal only to the Russian president. Ever since the war began, this group's business has boomed. Its fighters are raking in big bucks, so much so that the Wagner Group no longer operates in the shadows. It has gone public. I'll tell you how, but first some FAQs. What exactly is the Wagner Group? It's a private Russian military force. It offers mercenaries for hire, not just to the Kremlin, but to anybody who's willing to pay. When was this group formed? Somewhere around 2014. This is when Russia annexed Crimea. The Wagner Group played an enormous role in the annexation, it is believed. Who formed this group? A man named Dmitry Utkin, a retired military officer. Reports say he named the group in the honor of Richard Wagner, the favorite composer of Adolf Hitler. And who controls this group today? A man named Yevgeny Prigozhin, aka Putin's chef. Why chef? Because he also runs a catering business. He organizes lavish state banquets for Vladimir Putin, and when he's not preparing meals, he does the president's dirty work, like fighting his proxy wars. In the last 7 years, the Wagner Group is said to have exerted Russian influence in several countries. It has fought alongside armies, done the bidding of Putin's friends, and secured many oil fields for Russia in countries like Syria, Libya, the Central African Republic, the Sudan, Mali, and Mozambique. 6 months back, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Wagner mercenaries followed the military. According to British intelligence, some 8,000 mercenaries from this private army infiltrated eastern Ukraine. They've been deployed in Donetsk and Luhansk ever since. In recent weeks, however, many of them are said to have died. Reports say some 3,000 of them have been killed in the war, so the Wagner Group is trying to hire more. It has launched a unique recruitment drive straight out of a Hollywood thriller. According to a new report, the chief of the Wagner Group is personally touring Russian prisons. Apparently, that's their talent pool, prisoners. He's said to have toured 17 prisons and is recruiting 1,000 criminals as mercenaries. What do these people get in return? A way out of prison for sure, a presidential pardon, and a competitive salary, not to mention a free hand to kill. Reports say the new recruits get some basic training and then they're sent directly to the front lines. How much do they earn? 200,000 rubles per month. That's some $3,000. The salary also covers a so-called coffin payment, meaning if the mercenary is killed, his or her family gets a free coffin to bury him. Look at this poster now. It was spotted in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg. What does the poster say? Orchestra Wagner waiting for you, meaning come join the Wagner Group. Reports say billboards like these have become a common sight in many Russian cities. They're part of Wagner's efforts to make Russians join its ranks. These posters also reveal the group's evolution during the war. In just a few months, they've gone from being a secret mercenary body to an extension of Russia's military apparatus in Ukraine. You see, despite its global reach, the Wagner Group has been shrouded in secrecy for the last 7 years. On paper, they don't even exist. There is no registration in its name, no record of tax returns. Everybody from the Kremlin to the Russian Defense Ministry to the Russian president himself, they've all denied the existence of this organization. And now they're letting it install billboards and get featured in newspaper reports like this one. It's from a top Russian tabloid. It celebrates the Wagner Group storming of a thermal power plant in Donbass. And this, by the way, is not a report against Russia or the Wagner Group. They're not the only ones in this business. Private armies are a multi-billion-dollar industry today, the world over. They fight immoral wars, both for governments and non-state actors. You must have heard of Blackwater, a private military company. It was formed by a U.S. Navy SEAL. It was America's dirty works department in Iraq. It fought alongside American troops and carried out numerous killings. Then we have G4S, a private British security company. It's at the center of a series of scandals like torturing prisoners in South Africa and Palestine. My point is quite simple. Private armies have operated for years. They fought as proxies in shadow wars, committed violations to cover up for regular armies. The Wagner Group is doing it in Ukraine and now doing it openly. Our next story is about an opportunity worth billions of dollars. There could be a major shake-up in the Indian market, and Indian entrepreneurs have a chance, a small window, to make the most of this unique opportunity. What do you think the story is about? Smartphones. India's smartphone market is worth $139 billion. Most phones sold today are budget smartphones. I'm talking about phones that sell for $150 or less. That's around 12,000 Indian rupees. Around 65% of the phones sold in India are budget smartphones, less than 12,000 rupees. That could mean a market of around $92 billion. And right now, Chinese companies dominate this market, $92 billion. But Indian companies could soon take over because Chinese manufacturers could be on their way out. Reports say India is considering a proposal to curb Chinese smartphone makers. It will not be a complete ban, but Chinese companies could be pushed out of an important segment, the entry-level smartphone market, the cheap phones. If it happens, it will be a huge blow to Chinese companies. Like I said, they dominate this market. Let me show you some numbers. These are from April to June this year, the first quarter of the financial year. More than 30 million smartphones were sold in these 3 months. 30 million. A third of these smartphones were priced at $150 or less. That's about 10 million smartphones. Up to 80% of these phones were Chinese. So that's about 8 million smartphones sold by Chinese companies in India in the last 3 months. And these are just estimates. The actual numbers could be higher. This segment, phones below $150, has the biggest customer base. In India, 2/3 of all smartphones sold fall in this price band. In other words, most customers in India buy entry-level smartphones, and Chinese companies rule this segment. I'll give you another example. Xiaomi is the biggest seller of smartphones in India. It entered the Indian market 8 years back. So far, it has sold over 200 million smartphones. Most of them are budget phones. Look at Xiaomi's current lineup of products. 66% of the phones are priced below $150. So a ban, official or unofficial, will deeply hurt companies like Xiaomi. They might not be able to sell most of their products. Next question. Why has India fallen out of love with Chinese smartphones? There are multiple reasons. The first concern is, of course, security. New Delhi has been worried about Chinese tech companies and their operations in India. The fear is that these companies compromise the data of Indians. Remember, Chinese companies have also been kept out of India's 5G rollout, the likes of Huawei and ZTE. There is no official ban on them, but they cannot supply gear to Indian telecom companies. Indian telcos are buying from alternative sources. We've told you about this before. The second concern is regarding their business practices. Indian investigators are probing several Chinese companies. Smartphone makers like Xiaomi, Oppo and Vivo have been raided. Their finances are being scrutinized. They face allegations of tax evasion and money laundering. And this has already made it harder for them to operate in India. Then, of course, there's the situation at the border. For over 2 years now, China has been provoking India. There are now 60,000 Chinese troops in eastern Ladakh. Beijing refuses to disengage and de-escalate, so India has stepped up pressure elsewhere. It began with the ban on Chinese apps. So far, India has banned more than 300 of them. And now Chinese smartphone makers are facing the heat in India. This opens a door for Indian manufacturers. It's not like Indians don't know how to make phones. Before China flooded the market, India had several homegrown brands. Companies like Lava, Micromax and Carbon, they dominated the market, but they could not compete with Chinese smartphones. This curb on entry-level phones could serve as an opportunity for the Indian players. Of course, they'll have to step up their game and win the Indian customer. You see, India is a price-sensitive market. Customers want the best products at the lowest rates. Can Indian companies match the quality of Chinese smartphones with all the latest features and at a competitive price? These questions are important because while Chinese companies are forced to leave, it should not be at the expense of the Indian consumer. As of today, 4 out of the 5 top smartphone brands in India are Chinese. The 5th one is Samsung, South Korean. Together, Chinese companies dominate 80% of the market. Is India really ready to dump them? We'll have to wait and see. Now let's talk about the Taiwan Straits. The tension continues to spiral there. Taiwan now says China is preparing for an invasion. Listen to what their foreign minister said.
China has used the drills in its military playbook to prepare for the invasion of Taiwan. It is conducting large-scale military exercises and missile launches, as well as cyber attacks, disinformation campaign, and economic coercion in an attempt to weaken public morale in Taiwan.
Last week, Taiwan was celebrating a diplomatic victory, but now it must fend off a military threat from China. The PLA, the People's Liberation Army, has surrounded Taiwan. It has launched what experts call a pressure campaign. It has sent a large number of military assets to the Taiwan Straits. The Chinese drills began last week. Since then, more than 200 military aircraft and over 50 warships have been spotted around Taiwan. Yesterday alone, Taiwan detected the presence of 39 Chinese warships and 13 naval vessels. This is happening every day now. Chinese warplanes enter the Taiwan airspace, or the airspace near Taiwan. They simulate attacks on the islands. They conduct drills near Taiwan, and they fire missiles.
In terms of the range of its missile tests, China is clearly trying to deter other countries from interfering in its attempt to invade Taiwan. Its rehearsal of anti-access and area denial, or A2AD, tactics gives us a clear image of China's geostrategic ambition beyond Taiwan. In other words, China's real intention behind these military exercises is to alter the status quo in the Taiwan Strait and the entire region.
Apart from the military moves, Taipei has also reported cyber attacks and a disinformation campaign. This is a full-blown escalation, and China is using Nancy Pelosi's visit as an excuse for its actions. It ordered a range of targeted military operations. They were supposed to end in 4 days. Today is day 6. There is no end in sight. Is China really preparing for an invasion? The US says it is, not immediately, but in the next 2 years. Listen to this.
After Speaker Pelosi's trip and China's reaction, do you still believe China will not militarily seize Taiwan in the next few years?
The crisis, across the strait is essentially a manufactured one by Beijing. Speaker Pelosi's visit is not the first time that a Speaker of the United States House of Representatives has traveled to Taiwan. Certainly, congressmen and women from the United States regularly go to Taiwan. Nothing about the visit changed one iota of the U.S. government's policy toward Taiwan or towards China. So really, China's reaction was completely unnecessary. And all I'll say is we're not going to take the bait, and it's not going to work. What we'll do instead is to continue to fly, to sail, and to operate wherever international law allows us to do so, and that includes in the Taiwan Strait.
So Idris didn't ask whether it was a manufactured crisis by China. He asked whether there was a new assessment as to whether China would take Taiwan militarily in 2 years. What's the answer to that?
No.
So that is the American assessment. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan by 2024. The US is doing its best to paint China as the aggressor, and it is. But the US too had a role to play. It knew how Beijing would react to Nancy Pelosi's visit. She was the highest-ranking US official to visit Taiwan in 25 years. Pelosi might consider it as an achievement, but China saw it as an affront to its sovereignty. It's a different matter that China does not think twice before violating the sovereignty of others. But it has taken exception to this visit and has issued yet another warning.
The current tension in the Taiwan Strait is caused by the Democratic Progressive Party authorities' constant attempt to seek independence in collusion with external forces, their refusal to recognize the One China principle, and their intentions to change the status quo that both sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to the same China. We warn the Taiwan authorities that any attempt to go against the tide of history and resist unification by force will be firmly rejected by the entire Chinese people and is doomed to failure.
Strong words there. But what does Beijing really plan to do? Its mouthpieces have some insight. The Chinese state broadcaster CCTV recently ran an interview of Meng Xiangqing. He's a professor at the National Defense University in Beijing. This is China's top military academy. According to Meng, the PLA has specific objectives for these drills. It wants to, quote-unquote, completely smash the so-called median line. The median line is the unofficial border between China and Taiwan. It separates Taiwan from China. Beijing wants to make this median line irrelevant. End the border. And that's not all. The PLA is also demonstrating its ability to blockade Taiwan. It's trying to control the Bashi Channel. Now, this is an important sea link. Some experts believe it is the only way to enter and exit the South China Sea. How does the blockade help China? It can cut off Taiwan's access to valuable imports. It can also stop military aid from coming in. Nancy Pelosi's visit has left Taiwan vulnerable. The military threat from China is growing by the day. Taiwan has no option but to prepare for war. It began its own military exercises today. Taipei conducted live-fire artillery drills. They practiced defense maneuvers and how they're going to defend Taiwan if China invades. Taiwan said these drills were scheduled earlier and that they're not a reaction to the Chinese moves. But almost immediately, Beijing shot back. The PLA statement said that the Chinese military will continue its drills around Taiwan. So clearly, Beijing is not backing down. The situation is precarious. One misfire can start a war. Our next story is from Kenya. Earlier today, Kenya went to the polls to elect its next president, the fifth president since their independence. The results will be out in a few days from now, but the race is too close to call. So far, no candidate is expected to secure a majority. Analysts predict a runoff election, another round between the top two contenders. Who are these contenders? What are their credentials? What is their agenda? And why do these elections matter, not just for Kenya, but for the region? Our next report explores.
It's election season in Kenya, a country of 56 million people. It's voting to elect its next president, the successor of Uhuru Kenyatta, who has ruled for the last 10 years.
Well, this is a day of voting. I think this is the day when we all want to pray that Kenyans vote, turn out and vote in peace, go back to their homes as we await the results.
The race is close. The stakes are high. Kenya is the economic hub of East Africa. It serves as a commercial gateway for Central Africa. What happens here will have repercussions in the entire region, a region infamous for political instability and corruption, with a history of leaders clinging to power for decades. So the decision Kenyans take will have far-reaching consequences. It could set a precedent for other African nations to follow. So who are the candidates? There are two front-runners, Raila Odinga and William Ruto. They are locked in a tight race. Odinga is a former prime minister. He's contesting the election for the fifth time. Odinga is the son of Kenya's first vice president. The 77-year-old has come close to victory twice before. This time Odinga faces a much younger opponent, 55-year-old William Ruto. He is a sitting deputy president who has touted himself as a hustler. Ruto seems determined to succeed Kenyatta. What issues are the two candidates contesting over? The ones voters care about. Wiping out corruption, stabilizing the economy, post-pandemic recovery, rising food and fuel prices, and unemployment.
Our country now is just full of corruption. Once someone will come and deal with that issue prominently.
The vote was held on Tuesday. There were 22 million registered voters, but only 30% had cast their votes by noon. Reports say the turnout was much lower than 2017. When are the results expected? In a few days from now. To win outright, a candidate needs more than half the votes. Will there be an outright winner? The chances are low. Analysts are predicting a runoff election within 30 days. They are also requesting the candidates to accept the results. The 2007 election is still alive in their memories. This is when a dispute over election results led to violence. 1,200 people died. 600,000 people were displaced. This time, the candidates and their parties have vowed to accept the outcome. Here's hoping they keep that promise.
As always, Africa's fortunes depend on a lot of factors, a lot of outside factors. Until World War II, the entire continent was carved up by world powers. It was a hotbed of exploitation and discrimination. 7 decades later, the world powers are back: Russia, the US, and China. First to visit was Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. He traveled to Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Congo. Lavrov's visit had two objectives: A, to show that his country still has allies. Many African countries have refused to condemn Russia's war in Ukraine. Lavrov's visit was supposed to reaffirm those ties. And B, to control Africa's resources. I'm talking about both human and natural resources. Africa is home to 30% of global mineral reserves. It is also an emerging market for foreign products. Russia wants a chunk of both. Now, Lavrov's visit was back in July. 2 weeks later, the US has dispatched their foreign minister, Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He landed in South Africa earlier this week. He kicked off his visit with this promise.
The United States will not dictate Africa's choices. Neither should anyone else. The right to make these choices belongs to Africans, and Africans alone.
Sounds like a good line, doesn't it? One of those statements that history books tend to like. But beyond that, does it signify anything? The whole point of Blinken's visit is to build up US influence. He may not be saying it, but Blinken's message is quite clear. Do not pick Russia or China. Is that not dictating choices? Why else did Blinken rush to Africa immediately after Lavrov? So let's keep the romanticism aside for a moment. Let's focus on the power play. Blinken's schedule is politically significant. His first stop is South Africa. Their government has traditionally been neutral to global conflicts. In Ukraine too, they have not picked a side. At the same time, South Africa is key to the continent's future. A, it is politically stable, and B, it is the second largest African economy. So good ties with South Africa are high on America's agenda. Blinken's second stop is the Congo, one of the most richly endowed African countries. It has deposits of diamond, gold, copper, cobalt, tin, and lithium, all crucial minerals. The US is hoping to gain access to these deposits, or if they can't access them, at least keep Russia and China out. The final stop is Rwanda, an important ally of the United States. It is also involved in a conflict in eastern Congo, so Blinken will be hoping to hit two birds with one stone. Use his leverage over Rwanda to ease the tensions in the Congo. Will it work? We'll find out soon enough. On paper, the US is well placed to build ties in Africa. They have deep pockets, they have the military infrastructure, they have no colonial past in Africa. So why exactly have they not performed well? Because of poor leadership, you could say. Barack Obama's presidency was supposed to transform America's Africa policy. After all, he was the first African-American president of the US. His father was a Kenyan government official. But like most of Obama's policies, it was a failure. All talk, no action. Donald Trump was a step further. He insulted African countries. In fact, Trump never visited a single African country as US president. Imagine that. 4 years, 0 visits to Africa. And during this time, Russia and China were busy. Russia built military ties with Africa. China built economic ties. Let's start with Russia. Their mercenaries are fighting in multiple African wars in Mali, in the Central African Republic, and in Libya. They also buy a lot of Russian weapons. Almost 49% of Africa's military imports come from Russia. This includes tanks, fighter jets, helicopters, guns, all sorts of weapons. This defense trade has given Russia diplomatic clout in Africa. I'll give you an example. In the month of March, the United Nations passed a resolution condemning Russia's war. 35 countries abstained from voting. 35. Out of these, 15 countries were from Africa. In other words, they're not willing to hurt Russia's sentiments. Now, coming to China, in 2009, they overtook the US to become Africa's largest trading partner. Total trade, almost $254 billion. They're also the largest investor. In the last 5 years, China has pumped $70 billion into Africa. This money is spread across 287 projects. Most of them are white elephants. They're designed to push Africa into a debt trap. But then again, what option do these countries have? It's either poverty or debt trap. Not really a good choice to make. So compared to Russia and China, America is playing catch-up. The question is, how fast can they close the gap? A lot depends on Joe Biden's strategy. If he's serious about Africa, he needs a broader plan. He needs to get all Western partners on the same page. France, for example. Yes, they are a former colonial power, but France has considerable clout in the continent. Secondly, he needs to loosen his purse strings. I'm not talking about buying Africa support. I'm talking about genuine investments in Africa, safer alternatives compared to China and Russia. And all of this will take time. It won't happen with one visit by Antony Blinken. It will take a long-term plan with serious political capital. Our next story is about a breakup, a political split in India's Bihar. It's an eastern state, third largest by population, 12th largest by territory, once the center of culture and civilization in India, now in the news for its power-hungry leaders. It ranks low in education, healthcare and per capita income, but high in the number of civil servants it produces. Today, it has seen another political divorce. Bihar's Chief Minister Nitish Kumar broke his party's alliance with the BJP and resigned. Quick background. Nitish Kumar belongs to a party called the Janata Dal United, JDU. In 2017, he formed a coalition government with the NDA, the National Democratic Alliance led by the BJP. In 2020, together they won the state election. And 2 years on, they've parted ways. Nitish Kumar has gone back to an older flame, the Rashtriya Janata Dal, RJD. The question is why, and the answers are many. The split was in the making for a while now, mostly over differences related to political appointments. There was only one JDU minister in Prime Minister Modi's cabinet, so the JDU felt shortchanged, like it was being undermined by the BJP with token representation at the centre. And in Bihar, they paid back in the same coin. They started sidelining the BJP. For instance, when Nitish Kumar expanded his cabinet, his party got 8 seats, the BJP got 1. But for a while, they managed the differences. In recent months, though, things got worse. The JDU openly started opposing the BJP's policies, like the One Nation, One Election proposal, or the Agnipath scheme for the Indian Army. In both cases, JDU leaders called the ideas unviable. The Chief Minister himself started skipping crucial meetings, and today he flipped. Nitish Kumar broke the coalition and turned the tables. This is how the numbers stack up in the Bihar Assembly. Total seats 243, halfway mark to form the government 122. The BJP has 77 seats, the JDU 45, allies 6. The Rashtriya Janata Dal or RJD was the second largest party. Together with its allies, it controlled 110 seats. Today, Nitish Kumar has ditched the BJP for the RJD. He has staked claim to form a government. And this is being seen as preparation for the 2024 national election, another realignment in Bihar. Nitish Kumar is being trolled on social media as Paltu Ram or turncoat, and his record is stunning. He's made a career switching sides. In 1989, he supported Lalu Prasad Yadav in a party called the Janata Dal. In 1994, he dumped them to form the Samta Party. In 1996, he joined the BJP and became a cabinet minister. In 2013, his party snapped ties with the BJP and joined hands with the RJD and the Congress. In 2017, he broke this alliance and went back to the BJP. It's 2022 and Nitish Kumar has once again ditched the BJP and gone back to the RJD. Musical chairs is really a political game. And to be fair, most leaders play it. They change parties and alliances with zero respect for the people's mandate. And they get away with it because public memory is short, their options are limited, and their cynicism grows with every such episode. A political drama is playing out in Pakistan too. Earlier today, Imran Khan's chief of staff went missing. His name is Shehbaz Gill. Imran Khan says Gill has been kidnapped. The entire thing sounds like a movie script. The assistant of Shehbaz Gill is the eyewitness to this so-called abduction. He says a group of men intercepted the car and that these men came in 15 to 20 cars with no number plates. Shehbaz Gill was pulled out of his car, beaten up and taken away. So what really happened? Our next report has the details.
Imran Khan is worried. His chief of staff, Shehbaz Gill, went missing. The former Prime Minister says Gill was kidnapped. He released this video as proof.
मैं गाड़ी नहीं खोल रहा था उन्होंने फिर बाद में साइड पे करके मुझे भी तशद्दुद किया ये मेरी हालत देख रहे मेरी गर्दन देख रहे तो उसके बाद फिर उनको भी हथकड़ियां डाली है क्लाशनकोव से उन्होंने शीशे तोड़े हैं ऐसे क्लाशनकोव इसको मारे जैसे कोई वो दहशतगर्द था.
This man is allegedly the assistant of Shehbaz Gill. He claims his boss was picked up by unidentified men. They came in 15 to 20 cars. The vehicles had no number plates. The men had no warrants. But they took Gill by force. Where did Shehbaz Gill go? The Pakistani government says he has been arrested. He faces 2 charges: sedition and inciting the public against state institutions. Gill's recent comments could have angered Pakistan's government and security establishment. He recently gave an interview to a Pakistani news network. In it, Gill made several damaging allegations against the government. He claimed the lower and middle tier of the Pakistani army is being provoked, and the target is Imran Khan's party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or PTI. The interview triggered a sharp reaction from Pakistani regulators. The broadcaster was issued a show-cause notice. It said Gill tried to incite a rebellion within the armed forces. A day later, Shehbaz Gill has been arrested. Another leader has added to the drama. Sheikh Rashid, a former minister in the Imran Khan government, says he was raided.
4 गाड़ियों के साथ मेरे इस्लामाबाद के घर में रेड किया है और लाल हवेली में सफेद कपड़ों की एक पूरी प्लाटून भेजी है और मैं इनको बताना चाहता हूं कि मैंने आधी अपनी जवानी जेल में काटी है और आवारा क्लाशनकोफों में 7 साल कैद हुई है. मैं जेल से घबराने वाला नहीं हूं. जेल मेरी ससुराल है और हथकड़ी मेरी जेवर है और मौत मेरी महबूबा है.
Islamabad's police has dismissed Sheikh Rashid's claims. They posted this, saying the allegations are a part of a propaganda campaign. But the cops did not have much to say about the arrest of Shehbaz Gill. Bureau Report, WION World is one.
That's a lot of politics for one day. Our next story is about a bizarre auction in Pakistan. Guess what they're selling? Lions. A zoo in Lahore is auctioning off 12 lions to private collectors. And I can guess your first question. Why? Because the zoo is running out of space. Listen to this.
We have the capacity of 15 to 20 lions, and we already have 29 African lions, and we have 3 white lions, 2 jaguars and 6 tigers. So we have about 40 carnivores. Once they leave, it will free up space here, and their breeding will improve too.
Space is the big problem. The Lahore Zoo has a capacity of 15 to 20 lions. Their current strength is 29. So lions and tigers have to take turns using the paddocks. Not ideal for apex predators. In such cases, most zoos would have expanded their facility, perhaps built new structures. But Pakistan simply cannot afford that sort of expenditure. The zoo officials decided the best solution was to sell off the lions. 12 of them will go under the hammer on Thursday. The bidding will start at $700 per cat. I know what you're wondering. How is it legal to auction off a wild animal? Well, that's the issue in Pakistan. Rules governing wildlife are very relaxed in this country. In fact, many citizens own exotic animals. According to one report, there are 300 pet lions in Pakistan. 300. So the auction itself is not surprising. Having said that, experts are worried. Not every private collector has the adequate facilities to care for big cats. Plus, there is little oversight. Wildlife experts can inspect zoos and other enclosures, but once a citizen buys them, inspections are impossible.
WWF is very concerned about sale of wild animal because, some of the species are endangered, like tigers. And when we sell big cats, we do not have a proper monitoring mechanism for the facilities that buy them.
Zoos are supposed to protect wild animals. If they start putting a price on big cats, what hope do we have? Unfortunately, that's the story of Pakistani zoos. This one in Lahore is actually the best zoo in the country. How about that? The so-called best zoo is selling lions on the market. You can imagine the condition elsewhere. The capital, Islamabad, does not have a single zoo. Their last facility was shut down in 2020 by Pakistan's top court. The reason? Mistreatment of animals. Coming back to the auction in Lahore, who is eligible to participate? People who are registered with provincial officials. They must show that they have the resources to care for the lions. Let me introduce you to one such aspiring owner, Numan Hassan. He plans to buy at least 2 or 3 lions at the auction.
I will fully participate in the auction that is taking place at the Safari Park of Lahore Zoo. I will try to buy at least 2 to 3 lions from there for sure. There are a lot of new licenses being issued in Pakistan, so there will be more breeders who will participate in this auction.
And Numan Hassan is not exactly big on rules. Take a look at this picture. Hassan was walking his tiger on a leash like it's a pet dog or something. These are the kind of people planning to take part in the auction. Sums up the problem at the zoo. The fact is, this lion surplus was avoidable. Animal experts suggest at least 2 solutions. One is contraception. There's a lot of evidence that contraception does work on big cats. And 2, donation. When zoos extend beyond their capacity, they usually donate, perhaps to a facility that does not have lions. I guess in Pakistan's case, even that is not possible. After all, Lahore is their best zoo. Even politicians in Pakistan are involved in this trade. One lion smuggler, Chaudhry Usama, claims that he sold lions to leaders of the ruling party, 12 white lions and 19 brown lions. In fact, owning big cats is considered a luxury in Pakistan. Tells you why the country's wildlife is facing an existential crisis. At least 50 species are nearing extinction in Pakistan, 50. The government spends very little on wildlife conservation. It's ironic, frankly. Lions play a very important role in Pakistan's public imagination. Powerful leaders are often dubbed Sher-e-Punjab, meaning the Lion of Punjab. Former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was often called the Babbar Sher, meaning a lion king. But when it comes to the real big cats, Pakistan has failed. The majestic creatures have been reduced to auction items, caged, tamed, and unspirited. We'll wrap with that, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.